when it comes to pedagogy or my ability to design and implement PBLs or inquiry-based learning. I think it would be crazy not to note how much I appreciate the autonomy that I'm given at University Academy. I don't think that I would have been able to grow or learn as much without the ability to try new things, to be able to feel comfortable doing the trial and error thing that I've been able to do at University Academy. Designing a PBL for me is a great creative outlet. I'm able to step into the real world and create a situation that I feel like fits into the real world, like I said, but then also looking at the content from the perspective of my students and combining those two together to create something that is a real world problem, like we said, but also something that my students are going to be interested in. And so for me, that's fun, being able to kind of take that challenge and create something that fits both categories. This year we did a lot of different PBLs. We usually try to stay inside of a PBL or PRBL at all times. We did our physical properties food PBL this year, where students had to design a dish for Guy Fieri's new science-themed diner, and they have to talk about the different physical properties of their dish. We did a lawn service PBL where they had to create jack-o'-lanterns and talk about the different energies involved, as well as create a circuit to light up the jack-o'-lantern. We also did our security system PBL, which is always a great hit. We did the Animal Crossing PBL. We did a cell theory PBL that was based on like an art show, and they learned about pointillism, which is the type of art, and they had to come up with their own art piece that encapsulated cell theory. We did a Nintendo PBL where they created an organism and had to classify the organism and tell why they classified it the way they did. We did a space PBL. We did a fun mystery like PRBL over fossils where they looked at fossils like they were clues to a mystery, and they had to figure out what had gone on before using the fossils. But anyways, PBLs are fun to me. They make sense. And I wish that I would have gotten to go to a school that did PBLs. But as a teacher, I enjoy getting to facilitate that learning experience for my students. And so, like I said, we tried to stay in a PBL as much as possible. When it comes to pedagogy across the board, I really like, my goal for my classes to create something that is engaging and enjoyable for students, but will also create an enduring understanding. Like, I love when students are taking an assessment like STAR or one of their benchmarks, and they raise their hand and they're so excited, and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, Miss Greer, I remember when we did this, like whenever we did separate this mixture, this solution, or when we did the lab over structures and functions, and I remember this type of beak." So having that connection to the content and experience with the content, that's my goal. I want students to not just memorize or regurgitate, but to have hands-on experience with the content, whether they are creating something new, whether they are discovering something new. That's my goal with my class, is to create a connection to the science content that they're learning for them. When it comes to inquiry-based learning or student-centered learning, I feel like this is an area that I've really grown in that I have really started to focus on making sure all students are accountable for learning what they're supposed to when they're given the chance to find the answer to their question, or whenever I'm walking them through that learning experience that I want them to, making sure they're all responsible for each step. and that they're all learning the intended outcome in their own time. And so that's kind of something that I feel like I've learned how to assess that student-based or that student-centered learning or the inquiry-based learning, because at first I feel like that was something that I struggled with, and so I'm excited about that. Blended learning is something that I feel like is easier for me in small groups, and there are ways that I do that with tutorials or whenever I'm pulling students or when they're working on their playlists. But that's something that I am curious about for a science classroom, and open to one of my goals being learning how to implement blended learning in a more meaningful way consistently, and not just in those smaller groups, like I said. When it comes to STEM learning, I think it's super important. With my focus in STEM for my master's, I know that STEM jobs are where it's at. That's where I want to prepare my students to be one day in those careers. And so I do try to use consistent use of technology and different varieties of technology, making sure that that they're growing and learning, like I said, applicable technology that they'll use one day other than just Google Slides and Google Docs. When it comes to engineering, like I said, they're constantly in a PBL. They're always making new products. They're designing, they're creating. So a lot of engineering going on as well. When it comes to math, there's a lot of data, measurement, charts, graphs. And as we know, that's typically what's the lowest TEK in math. So that's something that I've tried to implement, is making sure that we are using data. We are looking at charts and graphs and dissecting them together to complement what's going on in their math classes. I also had the opportunity to do 2 different projects that combined art with science, and so that was exciting. We had our art cross-curricular project where we did mosaics in art for their math class. They were working on a geometry PRBL, so that was exciting to kind of help where I could with Robinson. Hats off to her, that was her masterpiece. But and then also with the PBL that I did with 6th grade with cell theory, there was a little bit of art, well, it was a lot of art tied into that. But overall, I see the value in STEM, and I do what I can to make sure that we're combining all of those curricula, making sure that it is all tied together, like I said. When it comes to curriculum, for me, my goals are growth for all students is number one. I want all students to be growing and to be learning and to be challenged. An enduring understanding, making sure that they are taking away an overall understanding of the content that they can apply and create with for years to come. I want them to be connected to the content and not just memorizing vocabulary or flexing some test-taking skill that I've created. Alignment to TEKs, as well as alignment to grade level and vertical alignment as well. So just alignment in general would be my next priority as a teacher when it comes to curriculum. And then lastly, I want to create a passion for learning and empowered students who are curious. So that's kind of like my goal for curriculum. Lastly, my concerns for curriculum, I guess like as a school, would be consistency, as well as our assessments, making sure that we're protecting the rigor of what's going on in our classroom through consistency and aligned assessments. Let's see here. Accountability, I think, is something that is super important. Sometimes it's frowned upon in education, but I think that accountability for students, for parents, for teachers, for all people who are involved with the education process is really important and something that should be protected and valued. And so that would be the second thing. And lastly, I think that just support and content knowledge across the board, making sure that teachers have that ongoing professional development as well as support in their classrooms in order to best serve them so they can best serve their students. Pedagogy is something that I feel like I'm still learning and growing in, and I hope to not ever feel like I've just learned it all. I hope that I'll continue to take risks and try new things. But like I said, I'm really thankful for the autonomy that I do have to be able to experiment and try new things like I have here at University Academy.